Thank you, Vonnie. We're joined by Congressman Dan Crenshaw, a Republican from Texas and author of the new book, Fortitude. It's garnered praise from conservatives, including former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, for its lessons on leadership as well as his experiences in the military. Congressman, thanks for joining us. Why did you choose to write this book, and why do you think it's important that the country hear this message now?
Well, of course, I started writing it quite a long time ago before this crisis, and it spun off of my experience with Saturday Night Live. Now, that story with Saturday Night Live plays a very, very small role in the book. I only talk about it in one chapter, and I talk about it in terms of how we shame each other in our current culture, and how we view shame, and how we should take responsibility and accountability for our own actions. But ultimately what I saw was a sort of degradation of our culture and a degradation in the way we speak to each other, and this outrage culture, this cancel culture where microaggressions are prevalent, where we should feel offended at everything, where we should play the victim instead of a victor. And now this phenomenon has been well documented by plenty of other books, talking about social media, talking about how the media plays a part in outrage culture, talking about how politics plays a part, talking about how our college campuses plays a part. I didn't write that book. I wrote a book of solutions in order to telling you how not to be that person on both a cultural level and a personal level. And so every chapter is a lesson in mental resilience. It's pretty light on politics. You know, I use political examples to make some points, but it's pretty multidisciplinary. There's a lot of references to psychological literature, to ancient Stoicism, to the Bible, to pop culture,
Stoicism,
and just personal philosophy in the SEAL teams.
You know, it's funny, too. For what it's worth, there are some funny parts in the book as well. I want to talk about what's going on with the coronavirus and COVID-19. You, Congressman, as well as Senator Tom Cotton, have introduced legislation that would allow for Americans to actually sue China. How would that work?
Yeah, so right now you can't go to a court and sue a foreign country because of the Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act. And that obviously makes sense. But in times like this, when there's growing evidence that the Chinese government deliberately misled the world and deliberately hid the virus, you know, for instance, they prevented domestic travel from Wuhan but allowed international travel. They lied about the human-to-human transmission when they knew better. They've not allowed scientists to gain samples of the original virus. That's one of the reasons our CDC had trouble making a test back in February, and they ultimately took longer than it should have. So there's a lot of growing evidence there. And the question is, how do we exert justice and allow the American people to gain some justice for that? And this is one way. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean you can go to your local lawyer and file a lawsuit. This legislation would limit the jurisdiction to a few federal courts that have a lot of experience in handling large cases. And I think in practice, it would probably look like a class action lawsuit. Now, the question is, okay, is China going to write us a big check that we split between Americans in the class action lawsuit? No, of course not, probably not. But let's not forget, the Chinese do have plenty of assets here in the United States. And so this is one tool among many in which Americans can feel like there is a sense of justice here.
In terms of the energy sector, and you know this in your district, energy is so crucial, so important, but sticking with geopolitics, are you disappointed at all at how the Saudis have reacted and how the Saudis have engaged in the energy sector in the past couple of weeks and months?
Yeah, of course. There is a sense of betrayal there. Saudi Arabia is supposed to be an ally of the United States. We have, let's not remember with the first Gulf War, where we quite literally protected them from invasion from Saddam Hussein. We continue to our presence there in the Middle East protects Saudis from Iranian aggression, and we would like them to act in kind. Now, it's obviously more complicated than that. It's not just Saudi Arabia's output. It's also just this massive, massive drop in demand globally that has dropped prices. And so, I'm disappointed. I want them to be more of a partner and decrease their output to a greater extent. And we should continue to exert political pressure on them to do just that. In the meantime, we do have to take steps to help our own oil and gas industry, because once they go under, it's not obvious that they'll come back. And we do run the risk of losing the energy independence that we've gained over the last decade or so. And to those listening who have economic or environmental concerns over that, and this is the problem, right? This is why it's so hard for Congress to do simple things like allow more purchasing into our strategic reserves. I mean, this is, of all times, we should be filling up our strategic reserve right now, because oil is so cheap. This would, you should buy low and sell high. But we can't get Democrats in Congress to do that. Why? Because they hate American oil and gas so much. They believe that we can actually operate an economy based on just solar and wind, and that dogmatic, basically anti-science approach could crush this industry. And so we have to take some steps to actually help domestically.
And just one final question for you, Congressman, as you're staring down the next round of negotiations with Democrats in the House as it relates to economic stimulus, what's one thing that you want to see, Congressman Crenshaw, in the next round of economic stimulus?
Economic stimulus needs to look like reopening our economy. That's the only way to actually functionally and engage in economic stimulus. We don't have this endless amount of resources at the federal level that we can keep spending. Democrats would have you think otherwise. They believe that they're the nicest and most caring politicians if they just keep promising to spend more of your money. There has to be an upper limit to that, and we can't keep going back to Congress every few weeks just to vote on trillion-dollar bills. That's completely unacceptable. Okay, we did it once, and it was fine. We needed to do it, but this notion that there's just a CARES 2 and a CARES 3 and a CARES 4, that's not based in reality, and we have to be a lot more cautious in our thinking. We should be in Congress. We should be in Washington, D.C. next week, as was planned, to actually debate individual problems and individual solutions to those problems. Again, Democrats want to make you believe that we can only come and vote on big packages every few weeks. That's not true. We could come every single day and actually debate and actually look at what problems need to be solved. Okay, when is the PPP funding running out? We should have had that done weeks ago. Democrats chose to delay it, and then they try to claim victory by saying, oh, well, we got more money for hospitals. The hospital fund was not out of money. It still isn't out of money. They added more money to a fund that's not even close to being depleted.
Yeah.
This is the kind of gross politics that's occurring right now.